Welcome back. It's Monday, Daily Fantasy Baseball, and obviously there's a lot of other daily fantasy sports going on right now with the British Open finishing up. We just saw Jordan Spieth four-putted, but he did birdie after that, and he's making a run. Sergio Garcia, maybe he can get his first major, but we're here to talk about baseball today, and it's a big night, Daily Fantasy Baseball, which is kind of rare for a Monday. You don't see too many big contests. But today, I know DraftKings has that big swing for the fences contest, $100,000 for first place. There's some other big contests on other sites as well. So let's get right into the pitching options for today. There's a 10-game slate, and sometimes a lot of people don't really like those slates because it really limits your pitching options. Now, it is just 10 less teams that play, but that makes a big deal, especially on Mondays with aces pitching a lot on Sundays. Sometimes you don't get the pitchers that you want, and a lot of people have said tonight to stay away from these cash games. Now, if the weather is bad in a lot of places like it could be, I would recommend that to do that as well. But if the weather's okay, I actually like this slate for pitching, and I'll tell you why. First guy I want to talk about is Matt Harvey. Now, of course, he's one of the better pitchers in baseball. We've seen him come back from a little bit of struggle in the middle of the first half, but he's been good of late. He's been back to his old self. Now, he hasn't had a lot of big strikeout numbers, but he's been pretty good, and his price is hiked back up to over $11,000 on, on DraftKings and over $10,000 on FanDuel. But a lot of people look at those top flight pitchers, and if they don't have a great matchup, they're not taking them. Harvey's facing the Nationals, who are one of the better offenses on paper in the National League against right-handed pitching. But I don't think that's the case. You have to look at some other things, and it brings us to a teaching point today, and I want to discuss. And I'll bring you a screenshot real quick, or a screen share real quick of why. I want to discuss some things that I look at for certain matchups based on certain teams. And one of the things that we like to talk about as I bring up my screen share right now is how some teams fare in the last 14 days and how they're doing against different teams. Now, the first thing I want to talk about, this is FanGraphs. I've showed you guys before on different on the curve a few months ago when we talked about how to use this site. But one reason why I like Harvey today is because the Nationals offense has been bad of late. Now, I use that a lot because when you look at different offenses, there's different guys that are hurt, like Denard Span is out. There's some other guys that aren't hitting well, and that's a big thing because when you look at the last 14 days or 21 days, it can really tell you a lot, and I'll show you exactly what I mean. On FanGraphs, if you go to teams and team batting stats for 2015, it brings you to this page where you can find the splits and everything that you need to use. Now, if you head to splits, go to the last 14 days, you're looking at a team that really has not hit the ball well. It's going all the way down. Nationals right here ranked 29th, and that's just a little bit of an overall thing and it's FanGraphs standard measures. But if you look at strikeout percentage, I'm going to click there to sort. Nationals have struck out 27.5% of the time in the last 14 days, which is over a span of 276 plate appearances. That's insane. That's a really high rate, and it's one thing that Harvey likes to do is strike out a lot of hitters, so that's giving him a benefit. Another thing in the last 14 days, click out of this, is they're only hitting 205. That's another insane number, and it's another reason why I like Harvey. So one reason when you look at these stats, and I've showed you before the thresholds I like to look at with different pitchers and facing offenses that hit for low average, low isolated power, WOBA, and a high strikeout rate. The Nationals are in the middle of the pack, but in the last 14 days, they're the worst offense in baseball. So you have to consider that. That's one reason why I like Harvey today. Let's click back out of this, and I want to discuss to you with some other pitchers for today. One guy has been very good since he's been called up, and that's Andrew Heaney against for the Angels. He pitches against the Red Sox today. Now, with Heaney, you've seen guys in the first four starts really come up and do well. Now, they haven't seen him in a little while for the rest of the MLB because he's been hurt and just came back up to the minor leagues. But in these four starts, he really has been good. Just has a 1.3 ERA, a whip of under 1. And he's done it against some really good offenses, which is another thing I like to look at. You see guys that have been pitched very well, but they face the Mets and the Phillies and the Rays. That's not really telling too much. But Haney's been very good against great offenses, as we just said. He's limited the Astros, who are a very good offense now with Correa back up, especially against left-handed pitching, which Haney is a left-handed pitcher. The Yankees, the Rockies in Coors Field. And I remember that game because we talked about using him, and he really used that changeup and his fastball, mixing those speed to be very successful in Coors Field. And the Mariners he's been successful against, who actually hit left-handed pitching very well, which is the opposite from what they did last year. But one reason why I like Haney is simply because he's pitched well against good offenses. But tonight he does face a good one, which gives him more of a benefit of the doubt. He faces the Red Sox, who are hitting just 232 against lefties so far this year. They have a weighted on base average of below 300 as well. So it gives him the ability to face a porous offense who really has not been hitting the ball well. And it's not in Fenway Park, which is a disaster for pitchers to pitch in with that the short fence in left field with this huge wall that doubles bang off of. And they have a they have a short porch in right field as well for home runs. But it's in Los Angeles today, and that gives Haney another advantage. So for a guy that's been pitching well, has a very good matchup, and it's not a really crippling price. He's just over $8,000 on FanDuel or on DraftKings as well. So you can get him as a starting pitcher too behind Harvey and cash. And I think he's a nice option to use in tournaments as well, and even on FanDuel where you look at if you want to save some money and not use Harvey. The other guy I wanted to talk about, and he's my second or third pitcher. I haven't decided between him and Haney yet, and that's Gio Gonzalez against the Mets. Now, one reason why I don't think I can use him on FanDuel and cash is because he's facing Matt Harvey. And on FanDuel, we talk about you really need those wins because that's 4 points that really comes up big, considering that a big score is over 15 on FanDuel. So 4 points is almost 33% of your total. And if he's not got a chance to get that, and that's exactly what facing Harvey does for you, I'm not sure I can use him. But on two-pitcher sites where you're rewarded for Ks and working deep into games, I might be using him with Harvey in cash games, which is a little bit of a rarity because only one of those guys could possibly get the win. But you're looking at a guy that's facing a Mets offense who's been really bad this year. And even though he is facing off against Harvey, and I don't necessarily want to use both most times, this could be a very low-scoring game. And if that game script goes to my advantage, it makes for a very nice play together. He does face the Mets, which we just said, who have the 24 strikeout rate against lefties. They're hitting just 222 against left-handed pitching, which is really incredible because they have some decent right-handed bats, like John Mayberry, who's one of those platoon guys. Daniel Murphy can hit the ball. Lucas Duda was hitting lefties very well, even though he is a left-handed pitcher earlier in the season. He has been struggling of late, but they have a decent offense. They've just not been performing well against left-handed pitchers. Gio Gonzalez has also been very good of late. He has just allowed just 2 earned runs in his last 20 innings. And the only thing is we just talked about with that win, if he can't get that, I'm not using him on FanDuel. But on DraftKings, and I'll say it again, I'm going to probably pair him with Harvey simply because of the fact that he has that ability to work deep in the games and he's been pitching well. Now, those are the 3 guys that are kind of highly priced, and I'll be using them in most of my cash games and Haney in tournaments as well. With Harvey's ability to strike out guys, I'll be using him as well in tournaments. But there are some other cheaper guys that showed up in my research, and I wanted to talk about those guys real quick. Ruby De La Rosa against the Marlins. He's not been very good lately. He's given up, I think, 7 or 8 home runs in his last 4 starts. And the Marlins have good left-handed bats that can hit for power. So I'm not sure if I want to be targeting him very much, but he did show up in my research. Other guys are Tim Hudson against the Padres. Padres' offense has been really bad, but Hudson isn't the same pitcher he once was. The next guy is Alfredo Simon. A lot of people are talking about him today against the Mariners. He has a great matchup, but I'm staying far, far away from that guy. He's been getting shelled, I believe, 4 or 5 starts in a row. He's averaging, giving up at least a home run a game, 7 or 8 hits. He hasn't been able to get out of the 3rd inning. I'm staying far away from a guy like that because until he can prove he can pitch well again, I'm not going to be putting him in my lineups. The last 2 guys that showed up are Michael Lorenzen against the Cubs. And he's a sneaky play because he's extremely cheap. The Cubs strike out a lot, and Lorenzen has actually pitched well. The problem is he doesn't strike out a lot of hitters, but with the fact that the Cubs strike out a lot, maybe it gives you a little bit of an advantage to use a cheap pitcher. His upside is very limited, but at that price, that upside doesn't really matter too much. The last guy that showed up is David Buchanan. Now, I see some people wincing. I can already feel it, but the Rays are the worst offensive baseball against right-handed pitching. They lose to DH playing in the National League Park. The problem is it's still David Buchanan. The guy's ERA is close to 8. His whip's around 2. Just don't use him today. He has a good matchup. I've always talked about right-handed pitchers against the Rays, but he's one of the worst pitchers in baseball, and that could be a really ugly game. I'm staying far away from him there. So to wrap up, I do like Harvey and Gonzalez or Haney in cash games. I will probably be using more Harvey and Gonzalez on two-pitcher sites like DraftKings and Fantasy Aces. I do like Andrew Haney on FanDuel as well as a one-pitcher site along with Harvey, depending if you want to mix and match your games over there. The one thing I want to talk about is I have a lot of lineups tonight, so I'll be using a lot of these pitchers. But the guys that will be most highly owned, I just talked about Harvey, Gio Gonzalez, and Andrew Haney. Those are my thoughts on pitching today, so be sure to stay tuned for the rest of the RotoCurve videos. I know Benny has his bats coming. If it's not already out, Danielle has her weather update later in the day. And just look at all the rest of the tools that we put up for on RotoCurve. You can use that to do your own research and make a lot of money. So good luck tonight, and let's win some money.